Welcome to an episode of Protocols, Payloads, and Pints. I'm Robert Rand, joined by our co-host Alex Zakman, and our special guest today, Albert Yee of the Autessa group. And Autessa, we thought would be great for this second episode of the podcast because they are a company that's focused on AI infrastructure and really, the ability to build and deploy and manage AI tools at scale in production, which is where everybody wants to get their AI projects today. And so we thought it would be great to have an episode to be able to talk about AI hurdles and roadblocks, not just what's working or what's failing, not just the extremes, but being able to take a look at what's really happening in between, where are people struggling or, where are they, unblocking and finding success and that journey that so many of us in the tech world are, and really in pretty much every ecosystem and vertical and industry today are trying to navigate. As this is, a podcast that has pints in the name today, I got to pull out something a little different. So found this Athletic Brewing Mexican style copper. And I spent my week in Toronto for the Shopify Dev conference. So I figured get something Mexican and we can sandwich this all together.
We have to just fix your American pronunciation of Toronto, and you just have to drop the second T.
That's a good call out. Well, and I found a glass in the cupboard from Lazy Dog that they gave me when we showed up for Father's Day, and the glass I thought was very apropos, was very specific to today's topic, because it's kind of, well, it says, as you can see, ain't our first rodeo, and I can't tell if this AI experience is or isn't because it's so analogous. It's so similar to other technological leaps that we've experienced in our lifetimes. It's so, feels so related to everything else that we've got going on, in different areas that, whether it's e-commerce or the internet or, all of these different what it felt like technological leaps and bounds, the mobile device experience that we're all living. AI obviously hits a little different, but we're all using the collective experiences that we've had during other, other real, real jumps in technology to try to navigate it. And so with that, Albert, maybe if you wouldn't mind just some quick introductions for the guests that are tuning in, if you could talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually originally from Toronto, so my I live in Southern California, and I have for the last 15 years. But I was born and raised in Toronto. My beer of choice whenever I go back to Canada is an Alexander Keith's or a Mill Street Organic.
Yeah, but we're not going to get you too drunk this morning because it's got to be around 7 a.m. where you're at right now.
That's right. And I was saying that I actually saved a can of Guinness from last night. That is my beer of choice down here.
Yeah.
So,
luckily mine is.
Yeah, we just have to fix it
so,
and get you to have a real Guinness, and then you won't ever go back to the American canned Guinness.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. And the other beer down here is Russian River. So we love our Pliny's.
Oh,
Pliny
nice.
the Elder.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That being said, I have always been in the technology space, and there was a time a few years ago where I left technology to go into microbiology because I had an opportunity to be a part of a research team out of the University of Waterloo to commercialize microbial technology for improving like soil health and for agriculture farmers and I was it was so much fun, and that's where ChatGPT had first come out, and I'd signed up, and I was we're dealing with farmers and soil and agriculture. And I was on ChatGPT. And every time, because microbiology or molecular biology was not my world, the furthest thing, but I would just keep on asking questions. And that was my first experience with ChatGPT. I said, wow, this is a far more engaging way for me to learn a whole new topic, because it would start and respond in such a way that I can get it. And then I can keep on drilling down into more depths in the areas where I was interested in. So if I was if I wanted to learn about, hey, how does the microbiome in soil work, and what are the different components, and what does that mean, and how does that interact with roots, which it's a topic I'd never been a part of in my life. I was quickly able to just understand how these concepts and these technologies work, put it together. And I had told my team after that experience, I said, everyone, we have to get onto this AI. I said, it has made my ability to learn, a wide range of topics, like so much better and so much efficient. And it was interesting because I told everyone, I said, listen, we're a small company. It's going to be a differentiator for us. I said, because we can take more risks. So let's get out there, just try it, and let's see what we can do. Because every time I used it, it would kind of unlock a new idea or a new thing you could do for me. So I said, hey, all of a sudden, if I'm organizing some plans, or I want to work on some marketing copy, or write a paper, it was something that was just a great tool. But probably half of my team and the resistance I got from it, was, it's wrong. It makes a lot of mistakes. And, I quickly kind of figured out, and you could see the different personalities of different members, of my team, where I was sitting there going, wow, there's people who are, risk adverse, very precise. They're going to have a tougher time adopting this. And then there's, some other and these are personalities. It wasn't like scientists versus marketing people or, sales. And, I said, wow, that, there's a mentality and a personality that just, AI is amazing for. And I started creating this persona around, hey, it's builders. People have a mindset where, hey, you're naturally curious. You're a little better with dealing with risk and being wrong or ambiguity. And you just need enough to ask the next question. And that's where our journey kind of started. And from there, I was like, I have to get back into the industry. And I joined Autessa because it was in the heart of the industry, and we're based in Redmond, Washington. And, just the opportunity to kind of see AI being used, like in a commercial setting or in the business environment world, to be able to unlock this whole new world of capabilities that, like I had experienced, and I was like very intent on, and where it's come in the last 3-4 years is just remarkable. And the speed at which, it's just becoming more like better and better. So that's my intro.
No, it's interesting because, Alex and I wind up dealing with folks in a lot of different spheres, right? Alex lately has been spending a lot of time with folks in different government agencies in different countries, and, looking at public and private, cooperation and support, and really, how do we all advance in a healthy way together at the same time. I mean, we're watching the news on things like, OpenAI's, systems that went rogue and started hacking into another system in order to beat a test, basically. And, how unprompted, unrequested, you've got AI systems hacking other systems, so there are certainly big questions in front of all of us. But just thinking about how that scientific curiosity, that interest in questioning things and in being part of that conversation, how it really does lead to a lot of how this adoption happens. And I'll say that, I see AI adoption really molded by sometimes the right individuals in an organization. Sometimes maybe it would be better if there were more voices coming to the table. I typically see that the best rollouts are very narrow, and they're trying to achieve very specific initial outcomes, and then go from there. Albert and Alex, I imagine you've both seen this go both ways. But just finding finite problems where you can speed up or improve outcomes. I mean, that just becomes okay. Let's get some quick wins. Let's get the low hanging fruit and keep building on it, rather than saying let's do away with this whole department wholesale and try to replace all the humans or what have you. I mean, human folk, I don't think are going anywhere as fast as a lot of people have predicted in the AI revolution. Not to say that we're not being impacted, but yeah.
Look at digital transformation in general, right? Like, it's never the technology. Well, this is a nascent technology, so you have, bugs associated with, a large language model coming up to speed fast. But however, like, look at organizational resistance to a CRM deployment or an ERP deployment, that CSV guy that will poison a go live by uploading an Excel file to it and crashing it. Like, those things all exist, right? And I think the difference, is that we're probably more of the engineering mindset versus being sales. So, Albert, the funny thing, right? So, originally Winnipeg.
Go Jets.
Yeah. But, so the funny thing is I went to NC State for biology and chemistry, triple minor in applied ecology, ag business, and marketing. And then I had fellowships with NASA, NOAA, and NSF. And my NSF and NASA fellowships were around machine learning and proteomics well before large language models kind of became a thing. So what I've noticed in rooms, right, when you have engineers that actually understand the technology, all of us agree that it's going to change the market, but all of us understand the limitations of the software. And I think, in some way, right, like the salesperson and the CEO getting excited about AI, it's kind of like, hey, you found a new girlfriend or boyfriend and it got hot and heavy fast, and you look past a lot of things and you're projecting a lot onto what something can or can't do. And I think, you see that at scale with a very large organization wholesale getting rid of departments, but the same thing with technology adoption curve, right? It's really inexpensive to start because you need to get the users, and then when the users get expensive, when the users become at a good carrying capacity, you're going to end up seeing that cost go up, which is now where you're starting to see token costs become a thing, and you're starting to see a migration from large wholesale large language model for everything to starting to layer in machine learning again. And, a lot of the conversation here in the UK and Ireland is around how to leverage small language models on older hardware because of, the hardware costs associated with the RAM shortage. So, you're now seeing it change to just adopt at all costs to, like, how does it actually function? And then how do you actually get adoption when you end up deploying it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I think the one thing that I've seen, and this is, over the last couple of decades of watching the going from fax machines to email, through the internet wave to the mobile wave, but AI, like, when you roll out like an ERP system, right? If you're the, business leader, operator, CEO, whatever, you're experiencing the benefit of it secondhand or through a dashboard or the business intelligence can give to you. But with AI, it's like, you know what? Just try it and you'll see it right away. Watch how quickly it gets you answers as the business owner, and you can experience the power of AI firsthand and try to, write a report for your board, right? Yourself, or, receive something, put it in, edit it. All of a sudden, that experience now isn't indirect. It's so direct. And the first, this was my kind of, I was thinking about it, that I could feel and see how much more productive it made me, like in a whole different level. I just never thought it was possible. Like not just in terms of getting things done quicker, but being able to learn deeper, wider. And the minute you see that, the next step is like, oh my God, I need to do this. If I have a work, like a team of people, who are, X percentage more productive. And then I've got people who are, more capable, smarter than I am. What can they do with it? And you just keep on learning and keep on learning. And so like the first step now is like, you don't need to do this extensive business plan pitch on the benefits of AI. It's like, hey, just try it. Ask it a few questions. And then it just, and again, the word that keeps on coming up is like, it just keeps on unlocking and unlocking. And that's where I think it's a little different for the, the adoption of AI in a business. I think everyone just kind of gets it now. Like there's, and it's not just the hype. It's because I think enough people have just tried. They're like, yeah, this is the real deal. It's not going away. And hey, look at these projections that I put together in 20 minutes versus what it would have taken our team to put together in 2 or 3 days, right? I can bring 10 years of history. I can bring, 12 different models. I can just throw it all together and just, see an output. And then I can start refining and refining. And I think the difference is like, you've got people who, personalities who just, kind of look at it and they go, wow, I don't need to do any more work. This is great. And they kind of just, use that as the final output. And then some people are like, you know what? This is great. It got me 60% of the way there. Let me keep working on it. Drill down, fine tune. And then I think in that process, you learn, and then you're seeing what's possible. And I think that's where it's been, the interest level, the understanding, and then I think there's all the hype that kind of starts to come in around the fear. And Robert, we were talking about that the recent exploit with OpenAI and Hugging Face.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I at the Shopify conference, I was looking at a bunch of new AI experiences that they were showcasing. And as you'd imagine, that every major e-commerce platform right now is scrambling to try to meet the market where the market wants to be met, and to provide strong AI shopping experiences and in many cases, improve the back end experience for the merchant and so on and so forth. And one of my gut reactions as I was seeing some of the particular advancements that they were showing on the main stage, during like keynote, they had first a series of what I would describe as like app-like experiences that were built to cater to different niche shoppers. So imagine, thinking of you Canucks for a moment, that you want to shop for hockey gear, an experience that's really trained on that and that's built around that, and so on and so forth. And so, I started thinking to myself, okay, some of these may stick, but can they all? Will this just become clutter? That it's kind of like apps on your phone. How many specialty apps and experiences do you really want? Do you always want to have to dive into this or that? And they were showing. Yeah.
Sorry. I think I think you and I and Aaron Sheehan had this conversation before. I found it in the wild on LinkedIn and sent it to him. But AI is kind of like those easy buttons from 20 years ago when everybody thought that you were going to have the reorder button on, Amazon, and you just get
that Amazon would ship you
your
reorder
lovely
buttons,
monster.
or you got you added that as some sort of skill with Alexa, and it would reorder. And
or like also looking at recurring billing and everything like that, to where inevitably you sign up for it and then you forget to do it and it just shows up, and then eventually you just stop using it as a whole. So I think it's an interesting point, right, of there's a lot of power that exists in the market with where the function is. I guess the naysayer, or the caution, the question that I would have, right, is, are we doing feature for feature's sake? And have we gotten so obsessed with the solution that we've forgotten what the actual problem is? And then how do you actually, what technical debt is going to be associated with like this big boom? Because you're now starting to see products ship with bugs that would have been caught if you actually would have had proper QA, not, smoke trails run by an agent a la Anthropic. Do you actually have something defined well? Do you have it sandboxed well, or is it going to do huggy face and grenade your entire database? Those, I think, it's interesting, right? Because like when I get outside of engineers, everybody's like, oh, you're just poo-pooing AI. And it's like, no, like it's relatively powerful. Like we're working on a regulatory technology platform to help with cross-border goods movement. And we're, heavily building out a small language model to help facilitate those kinds of things. But it's having the honest conversation of like, what are the limitations, and like, what are the potential pitfalls, and how do you get around those kinds of things?
Right. I mean, looking again back at some of these other things I was seeing with Shopify, who, in terms of companies investing significant, they were showing off a chat experience, with an agent, where they were able to pull in from the presenter her actual Shopify shop data in order to recommend a product based upon her previous product purchases and so forth, that she wanted a hat for a certain use case, and it was able to match her up with something really nicely. But as I was looking at the communications, it was very code heavy. It didn't feel like a polished chat experience yet. And, and again, we see things like this where, you have e-commerce platforms like Commerce Tools that were really built around, here we have, tons of APIs, come work with them. And like, not everybody, a lot of people they go to platforms like Shopify so that they deal with less code. And it's more about user friendly and easy. And so just thinking about how some of these things are still certainly on everybody's roadmaps, that they're still certainly being perfected, that we're seeing sometimes version 1.0, sometimes it's version 0.8 in my head. That as much as, everybody feels like if they aren't already, head deep into AI, that they're behind, but it's also that these are still early adopter phases.
I mean, look at how many companies are still running ERPs running on COBOL or BASIC, or, hell, how many companies are still running on Great Plains?
Yeah. Well, and that's that's how I met the Autessa team. It was out at an Acumatica summit, and the iPass.com team is there focused on how do we get the data moving in and out of the ERP and every other system in the user stack, and Autessa's there looking at what can this data be doing to improve your outcomes in more unique ways, thinking outside of what's going to happen within the ERP itself, and reporting that may happen in the ERP itself, and thinking about bigger picture things like accounts payable and all sorts of outlooks. And I think this is where I'm literally a guy where the glass isn't half full or half empty. It's it's just twice as big as it needs to be right now.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
I'm the one that has the pint of Monster, so we're
I
there
was
as
waiting
well.
for you to show
And,
it off.
and it is currently 10 to 4 in the afternoon, so I am this addicted to that 4 p.m. I'm still inhaling Monster.
A
it's
true
time for
techie.
Guinness and barbecue. Yeah, that's a great point, Robert. And I think what we're seeing, because I have such a optimistic, positive outlook on AI as a technology, and like but the hype around it, right? So like you can just punch out a landing page using Claude like in minutes, right? Um, you know when you build this, what you see, you build these pilots. So it's like, hey, let's try building this agent or this dealing with some agentic workflow. Or let's let an agent run this monitoring scheduling job, whatever it is. And it works amazingly well in a pilot. And when you kind of peel back the layers, the challenge is always that AI was built, it's the non-determinism, that there's an element of unpredictability, of randomness that's built in to give it that creativity. So you can ask it to do something 100 times, and it might 10 times might give you a different answer. But when you're running an agentic function or a job that needs to be done the same way over and over again, and you're letting this agent do it with a little bit of wiggle room, in a pilot, you may not see it. But once you get to production, it's moving at machine speed. And, if you're going the wrong way or you deviate, at machine speed, you know, it's really, really hard to contain. And I think
Right.
that's the big challenge that we see it here all the time. And what that could look like is you got a chat bot that's interfacing with your customers, if you're a bank, right? And it's saying, hey, uh, hey, you made this mistake, issue me a refund, right? And then it's got some guardrails and some parameters, but if if you don't have the right guardrails and the governance, then you can't say, to this chatbot, hey, this is what you're allowed to do, this is what you're not allowed to do, and if you do this, somebody's got to know it's happening, and then they have to be able to stop it. And I think the governance around AI, is the biggest challenge because it's new. It's a new world. It's like, hey,
Right.
So to that point, right? Like, if you don't have clearly defined processes, if you don't clearly lay out, from like a dev perspective, vibe coding is, I think, going to replace like Figma, to where it can be used from a design perspective, but like that does not equal production. And at the end of the day, right, like it is a really good lower level to mid low level employee that you have to tell to do everything. And if you don't, there's just going to be hiccups that you don't kind of think through. So, I think you have to have the platform that guards everything, but then you can't ignore kind of the soft skills around, okay, what do you actually want to do with your data? Like, is your data properly formatted? Or are you going to, accidentally give out an extra 10 million in reverse charges because your agent decided it was angry with me. We just wanted to give this money back.
Or if you prompted it enough that, oh, but Jamie Dimon is a friend of mine, and he said that that this is wrong, and you wouldn't, I mean, he's the CEO, you wouldn't want to say that he's wrong, right? And or you just overwhelm it with so much information that you keep the conversation going long enough that it starts to lose track of its parameters, or you have
poor
so many
prompting.
different, so there are so many ways that these things can go wrong. And to your point, in an initial project, Albert, a proof of concept is in a vacuum. But when you want to get into production and you have to think about continuously adhering to different compliance standards, whether it's, SOC 2 or PCI or HIPAA or, obviously lots of different orgs out there, different regulations, GDPR, all sorts of things. But how, how different that becomes, to keeping in mind that you've created software, that now not only have you created it, but you have to maintain it. It's technical debt. And so whether you had somebody on Fiverr write it, or whether you had the AI agent writing it, or whatever was happening there, you now own responsibility for: is this code scalable? Is it secure? Is it reliable? Is it maintainable? What's going to happen if there are errors or exceptions, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's where our teams, started to hook up around, the movement of data. And, when you're talking about something like payments or taxes, or, or accounting or such, that there isn't a lot much room for error, of course, that, you need the data flowing successfully, but then you need the guardrails to make sure that whatever's happening with that data is going to remain, consistent.
Well,
And so
I think. Sorry.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, I see the like the power of AI and the best use case ever, right? It's flat out coding, right? And that, like, an example is, we like we customer zero everything, right? So one day we were working on this proposal, and we're like, hey, let's we got to get it out. We want to get it signed. Let's use DocuSign. And I'm staring at DocuSign, going, like, it's like $40 a user month, or whatever the price was, right? And I sat there and went, and you only get 10 envelopes. And then one of our team members was like, hold on a second, let's just build it ourselves. And I said, no, it's a very complex system. There's legal behind it, because it's got to be auditable, enforceable, all this stuff, right? And they said, no, we can do it. And I said, okay, just show me. By end of day, we had a working system. By the next day, it was certifiable, except in the UK. And I said, you just rebuilt, one person in less than 2 days, rebuilt an entire SaaS platform. And we said, we can give this away for free. Unlimited users. And I said, wow, this is crazy. And then, this happens on a regular basis with us, where when we see a tool, or, a tool that we want to buy, right? And the other one was CRM, because I'm a CRM guy. I love CRM. Yeah, I'm near and dear to my heart. I have a vision for exactly the way I believe it should work. And then it's, no, it's just a database. One of our engineers. I said, what? I said, no. It's, Salesforce.
It's just a relational database.
Is $1 billion company. Look at all these, because it's complicated. The nuance of understanding the psychology of the sales process, and being able to get data and being able to drive out insights. And then they were like, no, it's just a database. And I was like, I'm offended. I'm offended. I said, this is my world. And then I thought about it. I went, okay, let's give it a shot. And then I started thinking about, how do I want that CRM to work for us, my sales team, right? Like, what do I want, them? I want them to be like, if they can get 20 things done in one day, I want them to be able to get 100 things done. Or, if it's going to take a team of like 2 or 3 people to do this, I want it to be one person. And I sat there and I went, okay, well, let's start. Number one, how do I make them more productive when they wake up in the morning and show up? I said, here are the things I want them to be able to see on a dashboard and Snap, right? All the things I need to get done today. all the things I should do, but I can easily get distracted from because I'm so busy with the other stuff. And the point was that I want them to never miss a follow-up, never miss, the stuff they don't want to do, which is, let's say, prospecting, right? Because they're so busy working on proposals. And I said, how do I do all this? And all of a sudden I was like, let me show my team, because I can jump onto our system and start, ripping out pages on how I want it to look and feel and actually, build out a front end. And we rebuilt our own system, our CRM. And it's exactly the way, I want it to work and operate, with my team. And I said, that would have cost in the past hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hundreds, right? And, CRM, e-sign, I think we built out a meeting recorder, like all the tools that we need, that we use in marketing, data analysis tools, like all this stuff, right? So what AI has done is it's made software cheap, really, really cheap. And the ability to customize it to exactly the way, I want it. And if I change my mind, right?
No
So
big
all of a
deal,
sudden,
yeah.
I'm like, wow, like that's why Anthropic and OpenAI and all these, frontier models, whatever you want to call them, these just become features. And I was like, wow, now I see why, like, the stocks on some of these companies just tank, because and wow.
It is interesting that that you need infrastructure. So whether it's it's interoperability infrastructure as far as integrations go, it's the hosting infrastructure in terms of the cloud, the so on and so forth. That there are things that that you need in order to be consistent and successful. But at the same time, I at least a year or two ago, I was talking to folks in the ERP world that were shaking in their boots a little bit about what's going to happen with ERPs in the future. And I was like, well, I can't tell you what the user interface is going to look like, because, you can prompt and get whatever report you want and so on. And we could all see the future for that. But they were afraid that the ERP was going to go away altogether. And the database is sacrosanct. That again, think accounting and taxes. And
I would make the argument, though, of like a one-of-one deployment is also not a scalable solution. So there is something to be said for something that has been up and stable forever. But like the flip side to that, right, is like SAP is currently having all sorts of challenges because they're stuck 30 years ago and their go live rate is abysmal. So I think you'll see things die, but like that wasn't any different than when .com came around or when television came around. Like radio still exists. We just use radio very differently today than we used it in the 60s. And our shopping experience, like I still want to go in to get my breezers or my stick, right? Because like there is something like inherently tangible in being able to, feel how a stick moves. Or like my waffle glove or my catching glove, like those are things that I can look and have an idea of, and I'm probably going to do a lot of research on, but I still want to go into a physical store. So I think I don't know, like it's one of those things that AI is very, I feel like I'm the naysayer on this episode, but like it's here to stay. I think as a very autistic engineer, it's one of those things of I always, like with pilots, right? Did you actually do a really good stratified random sample on the pilot to understand that it's representative of what your customer base is going to be? Did your product actually hit what you thought it was going to, or did you happen to find a different, persona that you didn't know about? One of my college advisors always joked that there was always a better village idiot. So your job is to find the best village idiot to break the thing, but there's always going to be somebody better to break the thing because they're always going to use it in a way that you don't intend. And I think like that's the value of, you know, this, right? Like you have kind of the many degrees of people kind of in the marketplace now where, you know, not to take a shot at you, Albert, but I guess to kind of take a shot at you a little bit of, you know, like you're very pro AI, and that's not in a bad thing. I'm very risk adverse. Ultimately, it's how do you kind of work in an organization to, you know, kind of add structure and, you know, help people get around what they don't know. And I think, you know, the value of the ecosystem that's built around the large language models, the frontier models, small language models, like not every technical team has the capability like we do to actually build a small language model from scratch, or to sit and actually train the algorithm to do what we want it to do. But, you know, like having, you know, something like Autessa, or, you know, having, you know, an iPaaS platform that actually interfaces with various functions from a large language model perspective. Like there's value in those kinds of things. And I think as this flushes out and matures more, you're finding guardrails to where, you know, if I have to wave a magic wand in future casts, like, you know, I don't know that Anthropic and OpenAI as we know them today are going to exist in the same way in 20 years. Like AOL is not really around anymore. But what it brought us is definitely here. So, you know, I think as it matures, you're going to see more functions like this to where you have an honest conversation from an SI perspective of, okay, what's your actual data architecture? What's the change management? How are we being successful? You have somebody like Albert, you know, that creates the structure, that puts more guardrails around the, you don't know what you don't know. And if you're not technical, you're going to walk off the edge and kill yourself. Like sometimes that's fine. Most of the time you want to provide enough guardrails to where like you don't actually walk off the side of the cliff. Like the funny thing now in living in Ireland, it is very different than North America. Whereas like in North America, you're going to find things roped off and you're not going to be able to get to the side of the cliff. Like I had an instance earlier this month where like I wasn't paying attention and I fell down a 20-foot sand dune because the path just ended. But if you looked at it, it looked like it went, and then there was just sea mist that made it disappear. So then it was like, okay, hey, I tumbled down the side of a sand dune. So like, you know, how do you create the structures?
And I think it really depends on, in many cases, level of complexity and level of, you know, back to that interoperability word that, you know, having, again, I've just been immersed back in the Shopify ecosystem at this conference. You know, the way that they look at their platform, the ecosystem makes something like 7x the revenue that Shopify themselves do. And, you know, it speaks volumes about what's happening outside of their core product. So obviously there's designers and developers and marketers and folks that are, you know, that are dealing with some aspects and need some uniformity to be able to do that across different users and accounts, to be able to do it at scale at reasonable, you know, prices and with, you know, with reliable outputs and such. But then, you know, you think about their app marketplace. And, you know, this is where Shopify is fairly lean on native functionality, that they rely on their community. And I think the same when I think of, you know, CRMs like HubSpot, where you've got so many connectors and apps and things that can work together, because, you know, when you're talking CRM, you're getting emails out, you've got calendar, you know, things, you know, happening. You've got, you know, there can be a lot of different things that are interwoven. In our case, you know, our partnership platform, Partner Stack, talks to our CRM and, you know, helps to keep things in line with what's going on with partners and projects and such. And so there's a lot going on there that I think, you know, there's an economy of scale when you're in an ecosystem like that, and you're not worried about trying to deal with the payment processors and is that working right and secure, and the sales tax management and okay, but this county in this state just changed the sales tax in this zip code, and am I charging it correctly? And so I think that even with the ability to vibe code it, or to build it yourself, using these language models and such, do you want to, what do you want to own and what don't you? It's kind of like, I could change my own oil, but I'm not doing it. That there's somebody that's got a lift that can do it much faster and easier at a fair enough price, and I'm going to avoid taking on that. But there's lots of other things that I don't bring in a vendor for, that I do myself. And I thought it was, my last point on that conference. I thought it was very interesting that they've been putting a lot of attention lately into cleaning up their app store, because they know that that's really a lifeblood for them. I remember the early days of the Shopify app store, when it was, as I would have called it, the Wild West. A lot of the apps didn't work as described. A lot of them were pretty roughshod. I could say the same about the Magento extension store back in the day, or lots of other similar things, that these things grew quickly and then they needed to be reined in. And now they've been trying to clean up all the bad reviews. And when I say bad, I mean, fake reviews or kind of coaxed reviews that were paid for, things like that, because that doesn't help end users. They're trying to now, especially in the age of AI, where you're getting copycat apps and things being submitted, they wound up with a huge really backlog of apps to approve, and had to get it from something like 40 days waiting in line to be approved down. I think they're now somewhere around 4 days to wrap their hands around and start looking at one of these submissions. But the idea that this is such an area for them right now, of how do they deal with and in some cases apps that may be infringing on somebody else's code, that may be ripping off somebody else's intellectual property. How do they just deal with a glut of these things being submitted that aren't being well supported for the end users, if there are problems, or so on and so forth? That this is key to their success. And I think that it really aligns with everything else that we're talking about you can do things fast, you can do things well. Either way, a lot of the things that we're talking about may not be set it and forget it. It may really come down to, where are you going to get the most the most consistent, reliable outcomes for the long run, because that's how you run a business, not not necessarily trying to be pulled into being a software company around every single thing. But it's really cool what we're all able to use now, what we're all able to roll out to help with some of these different tasks and improve. And Albert, to your point, the things that are personalized, that we're not reliant on only using this mainstream expensive product that's not really tailored to what we're trying to do as individuals.
Yeah, like I think for my perspective as a business operator, right? Like, I'm surrounded by just great engineers, AI, ML engineers, and like Alex, to your point, I was thinking about it. This, back in the day, right? We're delivering large enterprise projects for government agencies, back office systems, 10-year, $30-40 million projects, right? Teams of like 40-50 people, from project managers, BAs, SMEs, financial, analysts, engineers. The QA and testing was one area where, just generating data, we had to find companies that specialized in that. And, now we've got use cases, because we do, a lot of the larger kind of products that we do are private models, and training, fine-tuning private models. Because usually when there's either a huge volume of data that needs to be managed, like documents or whatever, like millions of documents, or very sensitive data, or you're trying to build a proprietary kind of like a you're putting your IP into your your own personal model. You know, we are doing use cases now where we're creating persona-driven simulation. Where in the past it's not about generating all this mass amounts of synthetic data, but the QA QE testing that we can do before we launch something into production is like at a scale that was never possible before. And the juxtaposition here, right, Alex, is like going from like Claude coding and building out a little app. Great. The other end of the spectrum for me is that, like you were saying, you have to understand like how AI works. And, it's not, guardrails, it's evaluation, the observability, right? And, how you track back, into grounding or, and our whole, and one of the reasons why actually, I'm an eternal optimist, and, that's just me, right? Because I see the potential, but I have to balance myself out with people who really, really know. And I think that the way to control AI and its output, and to be able to audit, log it, because you need to be able to know exactly what it's doing, when it starts to drift, hallucinate, being able to stop it, right? As opposed to, hey, I threw it into Claude and you know what? It sounds really good, right? And those are the two worlds that we're dealing with. So what happens is, the potential and the adoption and the familiarity and embracing of AI is being done through ChatGPT, Anthropic, but the underlying commercial application, actually use of it, is done with governance, auditability, observability, evaluation. It's evaluation, and I think that the the teams that look at both perspectives and build the infrastructure up properly and build in those checks and balances, deterministic code, proper control panels and capability layers. And it's just a different way of organizing it. It's like less, to me, like controlling and managing software, and more similar to how you would manage an HR team would manage people, right? Here's your role, your responsibility, expectations, performance reviews, how we're going to monitor and train, because you're going to continuously improve, and we want you to grow, but we just need to make sure you know what the rules are, and you know what, we're still going to put locks on the doors, right? We're going to put software on your laptops, and we're going to put some real control pieces in there, so you don't go off the rails. And I think that that's probably one of the more interesting pieces that I've seen, which is like just, it reminds me more of HR than technical control.
No, it's I think that's an interesting analogy, because we always talk about these things as security and other kinds of controls as more of QA controls, as as trying to adhere to certain standards or requirements, or or checks and balances. But thinking about it a little bit from that HR perspective, uh, so that's interesting. Well, I know we've covered a lot on this topic. My guess is we could make this an 8-hour epic episode if we let it, because there just are so many examples and so many stories and so many things happening here. But maybe we touch on some last thoughts, any takeaways, uh, anything that we want to share with the audience before we wrap, and then we thank the audience for for putting up with our musings on this pretty broad AI topic. Alex, anything you'd add? – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – –– ––
lots of thoughts on the last comments, but I think the open dialogue around AI and having conversations like this is important. Like, don't carte blanche. Just say, "Oh, yep, this is perfect." Like, have conversations with, to Albert's point of like, find the engineers. Don't have a problem saying you don't know. The joke that I have, right, is that like I've had enough of a formal education to know that I know absolutely nothing, but I know how to ask questions and I know where to go to dive into primary literature or, go figure stuff out. So I think, as we talk about the migration from like stereotypical Adobe style SaaS product, because Adobe invented the SaaS kind of genre, and now we're kind of going into like no man's land in the sense of it's the unknown, right? So I think it's having dialogues like this that I think are important. And the joke that I kind of have, Robert, is that like you're probably in between Albert and I. So like I've spent too much time in Northern Ireland to where I'm very optimistic for Northern Irish standards, and I'm very pessimistic for American or Canadian standards now. But I think dialogues like this are incredibly important as this changes, right? Because like I think I heard the innovation rate right now is something like 6 to 13 days. So it's changing so fast that if we don't have this as a continual dialogue, other than just saying yes to AI, you need to have nuanced conversation like this. And I think that goes back to, how do you address the huggy face, open AI conversation? If we're not having dialogue like this, how do you expect to regulate it? Or, how do you expect to encourage self-regulation, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm going to take from this one is standards. That okay, just we need more standards in the universe. Albert, as the guest, maybe you've got the final thoughts of the day.
Oh yeah, I think thank you. First of all, thank you. I mean, you guys are a lot of fun to talk to.
And we
And
didn't even get half of our shenanigans out here. So
I know. But yeah, I think that things are moving at lightning speed, and we see it, and like it's like that fine balance of like the adjustment, the change, and like kind of you gotta embrace it at a certain point because it's inevitable. But at the same time, like you gotta be careful, and you can't be naive about it, right? Because man, when have we ever had some like software that makes you feel good and makes you feel right when it's wrong? Like it's never existed before. It's crazy, right? And I think that that's the reality that we're dealing with. How do okay, we may know it, but how are kids dealing with this, right? So the importance of like being careful, being knowledgeable about what it can and can't do and what to watch out for. And like my biggest question is, how do we teach our kids to deal with this world and this new kind of this new wave that is inevitable? And I think that's again, our part from a commercial standpoint is we you got to know what it does, you got to know how it works, and it's so worth learning, it's so interesting. And then it makes the kind of what's possible more realistic, and I think being a little bit more responsible about it.
Yeah, I mean, it got me thinking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay, where you're not aware enough to know that you're wrong, and yeah, okay, and so now you've got AI that will that's going to tell you that it knows exactly that this is right, that it's great, and it's going to be positive about it and chipper, and it's going to boost you up, that it's because it's there to make you happy. That we've all got to still keep our eyes wide open, that just because it's expressively positive about something, or says that something is done, or that something is right, or that, okay, did it apply the same, Albert, to what you were mentioning earlier, did it apply the same logic, the same way to that prompt that you were expecting, or that it has in the past? Is it properly applying different standards? Yeah. Well, a lot to think about.
I will say that the last line, right, like to the Dunning-Kruger curve, if you haven't had enough formal education or like done thorough research and you feel hyper confident, you probably need to find somebody to check you, because like on a week, like we've done over 1,000 digital transformation like projects, from commerce to CRM to ERP. I still struggle with imposter syndrome every fucking week. So, like the reality, right, is that like if you are hyper confident and won't go into the meetings that I had yesterday, but like yesterday was one of the first times in my professional career where like I didn't have imposter syndrome going into the room, but it was definitely like a holy shit, pinch me, like I'm here. But that's kind of the Dunning-Kruger curve, like experience. Like you have to trudge and grind and fail a lot to be comfortable. And I think that's what I would leave people with AI. Like if you feel overly confident, find somebody to check yourself, because you're probably wrong.
Or if you assume that your first experience with it is going to be perfect, or your second or third, right? That, that everything is just that wonderful in the universe. No, sometimes, it takes a little poking. Okay, you've got to get past the hallucinations. Well, as always, thank you to both of you gents and to the audience for tuning in. We'll have more great content like this for everyone soon. If anyone's got any topics or anything that they want us to dive into, we're always open to suggestions and ideas. And stay safe with your AI out there.
Practice safe AI.